Okay, so Neruda has written this book, 100 Love Sonnets. And the question arises, what is a sonnet anyway? Well, it's a kind of poem, and it's a kind of structure of a poem. It's a very old structure. It goes back 800 years. And sonnets have been written in different languages. The ones going back 800 years were in Italian, and those ones gave rise to sonnets in different languages. There are sonnets in Spanish as well. I'm most familiar with the sonnets in English, and I'm not an expert, by the way, but I know a little bit about it. In English, Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets, apparently. And here's one of the most famous ones, and this is a good example of how sonnets work and what the structure does. So in this classic sonnet format, there's 14 lines. 8 lines are doing one thing, and 6 lines are doing another thing. So in this example here, you see Q1, that's the quatrain 1, like a paragraph. Quatrain 1, quatrain 2, and then, let's see, that's going to be 8 lines, and then quatrain 3 and part C are 6 lines. So the C is the couplet. So it's actually 4 lines, 4 lines, 4 lines, and then 2. But we think of the octet and the sextet as in 8 and 6, because what typically would happen is that in terms of the theme, there would be some idea presented in the first 8 lines, and then kind of a turn, like a twist on that idea in the last 6 lines. So let's take a look at this. Oh yeah, and then the rhyme scheme, A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. So here's an example that the rhyme scheme has to do with the last words in the line. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. So the rhymes there are day and May, that's the A. Temperate and date are B, so A, B, A, B. Then in quatrain 2, it's going to be C, D, C, D. You'll have shines and declines, and dimmed and untrimmed. Then in C, you have E, F, E, F, which is fade and ost, shade and grossed. And then G, G, the couplet C and V. I'm going to read the poem because it's so much fun. And first we'll just say, in the first 8 lines, the poet, Shakespeare, is comparing this beloved person to a beautiful day in summer, and saying how actually, though, even though summer days are great, they come and go very fast. They're very, temporary, very ephemeral. Then in the last 6 lines, the argument is that because of this poem, that young person's beauty will not just fade away, because the poem will live on. So we'll come back to that idea. I'm going to read the poem. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometimes declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderedst in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Okay, so there's some tricky language in there now, of course, because it is 400 years old. I'm not going to go into the poem in detail. I'm going to stay with the notion of the sonnet and the structure of the sonnet, because that's what Neruda is playing with. Like, he's taking this very ancient form. And by the way, there are also sonnets in Spanish, which I'm not familiar with, but I believe it was very similar. The 14 line with a certain rhyme scheme, and the octet and the sextet, and these ideas, and also the theme of love. And actually the theme of love in poetry, and that poetry keeps love alive, is a very ancient theme. You see that all the way back to the Greek poets, all the way back to Sappho. Sappho, a woman poet who lived on the island of Lesbos, and that's where we get the word lesbian. She was writing sonnets to her women that she loved. So this is a very ancient tradition. And in the last 100 years, we've had this crazy idea that freedom is destroying forms. And if you just get rid of the nasty structures, then you'll be free. And really the opposite is true. If you get rid of the structure, then you have chaos and nothing. And this is shown here, how the sonnet form sets up these expectations. And then the poet can play with the expectations. They can give you just what you're expecting and then make a little twist on it, do something a little bit different. And as we go along, we'll see Neruda doing this. The last thing I haven't talked about here is the rhythm. And in these older poems that rhymed, and modern poetry doesn't rhyme. It's sort of like taboo now to rhyme. It's sort of like considered not serious, unless you're a rapper, of course, making millions of dollars, in which case, of course, you're using rhymes. Partly because they're fun, and partly because they help you remember the lines. So there's nothing new under the sun. Nihil novum sub solum. All of these techniques go back centuries and centuries. People think, we're inventing all this new stuff. Well, not really. We're rediscovering all this new stuff. So on the rhythm side, which you don't see in modern poetry very much now, or it's much more subtle. But in rap music, the rhythm of the lines is very, very clear. In Shakespeare, he was using iambic pentameter for the most part. Iambic, an iamb, is bum bum, bum bum, bum bum, bum bum. It's that rhythm. Pentameter means there was 5 of those 5 of those beats in each line. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see. And all of these lines are in that rhythm. So long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So that's the iambic pentameter. And as we will see, Neruda is playing with this form. He's not slavishly following a sonnet form, but he's acknowledging that. Well, I don't know exactly I don't want to say what he's acknowledging, but he's playing with it anyway. He's part of the ancient tradition, and then he's diverging from that sort of like for fun and profit. So as we get further on, we'll see this more and more. Now, just before I leave here, I want to come to this idea a little bit of the notion that by writing about the beloved, that keeps the love alive. even when both of those people are long in their grave. And is that true? And it's an interesting idea, right? If you think of the timelessness of love, that love, is in the heart, and that heart energy is not bound by time or space. And so, maybe it really is true that love, for example, that Shakespeare felt for this person is, we can still feel the vibration of that because of this poem. I think it's true. And Neruda is certainly playing with that idea too. So that's the question, does poetry really keep love alive? And I will leave this video with that question.